The question was asked like it was harmless, like it was small talk, like it didn't have the power to rip a man open from the inside. The office was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic 30 floors below, when his boss leaned casually against the edge of his desk, smiled, and said, "Daniel, can I ask you something a little personal?" He looked up from his laptop, already uneasy, because people only used that tone when they were about to step somewhere they didn't belong. Before he could answer, she continued, almost laughing, "You've been here 3 years. You're handsome, responsible, everyone likes you, why won't you date?" The words landed wrong, heavy. Final. Daniel felt his throat tighten instantly, like his body knew before his mind did that this was dangerous ground. For a split second, he considered lying, offering the usual excuse, too busy, not interested, focusing on my kid, the kind of answers people accept so they can move on without discomfort. But something about the way she looked at him, genuinely curious, unknowingly kind, made the lie stick in his chest. His fingers curled slowly against the desk, his breathing shallow, and when he finally spoke, his voice came out lower than he expected, stripped of all defense. "Because the last woman I loved died in a hospital bed," he said quietly. Then he swallowed. "And my daughter was standing right there watching me fail to save her." The room changed. The air felt thinner. His boss's smile vanished like it had never existed, replaced by a stunned stillness that bordered on pain. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her eyes glassing over as the reality of what she had just stepped into hit her all at once. Daniel stood up slowly, heart pounding, already regretting his honesty, already reaching for the emotional walls he'd spent years building. "I'm sorry," he added quickly, not because he was, but because people always needed comfort when confronted with grief they didn't expect. "I should get back to work." He left before she could say anything else, because staying meant remembering, and remembering was dangerous. Daniel became a single father at 32, not because of divorce or abandonment, but because cancer doesn't care how good a husband you are, or how much a child needs her mother. His wife Emily had been diagnosed late, and by the time they realized how serious it was, the future they'd planned had already started slipping away. Lily was 5 when her mother died. Old enough to understand death but too young to understand why love sometimes wasn't enough to keep people alive. Daniel still remembered the way Lily's small fingers dug into his arm in that hospital room, the way she whispered, "Daddy, why isn't Mommy waking up?" while machines beeped coldly in the background. That moment never left him. It followed him into every quiet night, every empty chair at the dinner table, every question Lily asked that he didn't know how to answer without breaking apart. After that day, Daniel made a decision without ever saying it out loud. His heart was closed. Love had taken enough from him. His job was to survive, to raise Lily, to make sure she felt safe in a world that had already proven it could be cruel without warning. Dating felt selfish. Falling in love felt irresponsible. Happiness felt like tempting fate. Lily was his whole universe now. Every morning started with packing lunches and tying shoelaces. Every evening ended with bedtime stories and whispered reassurances that Daddy wasn't going anywhere. Daniel learned how to braid hair badly, how to sit through school meetings, how to smile at playgrounds even when watching other families felt like salt in an open wound. He didn't complain. He didn't explain. He just endured at work. People admired him. They called him strong, dependable, inspiring. They had no idea how much effort it took just to exist without falling apart. And Claire, his boss, had noticed him long before she ever asked that question. She noticed how he never stayed late unless absolutely necessary, how he declined invitations politely but firmly, how his phone wallpaper was a picture of a little girl missing her 2 front teeth and grinning like the world hadn't hurt her yet. She admired him from a distance, never guessing that the reason he kept everyone there was because getting closer meant reopening a grave he barely managed to keep buried. That night, after Daniel tucked Lily into bed, she asked him something unexpected. "Daddy," she said softly, hugging her stuffed rabbit to her chest, "do you think Mommy gets lonely?" Daniel froze. He sat beside her, heart pounding, and forced himself to answer gently, "No, sweetheart, I think Mommy is surrounded by love." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then added, "I don't want you to be lonely either." Daniel smiled, kissed her forehead, and waited until she fell asleep before letting the tears finally come, silent, shaking tears, because the truth was loneliness wasn't what scared him. Love was. The days that followed felt heavier than usual. Daniel noticed it immediately, the way Claire lingered near his desk without asking questions, the quiet way she made space for him in meetings, the soft glance when she passed by that felt more like concern than office civility. At first, he wanted to ignore it, to retreat in the predictable rhythm of his life: wake, work, school pickup, dinner, bedtime, repeat. But something about her presence unsettled him in ways he didn't fully understand. It wasn't attraction, not at first, but a subtle tug at the walls he'd built around his heart, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, someone else could witness his life without judgment, without pity. Then came the email that shifted a company volunteer program at a children's hospital. Optional. Claire encouraged participation casually, as though it were just another corporate initiative, but Daniel felt his chest tighten when he read it. Hospitals had become a battlefield of grief for him, a place where every smell, every sound could send him spiraling back to that day, back to Emily, back to Lily's small, frightened eyes. He almost deleted the message, almost pretended he never saw it. But then Lily, sitting at the kitchen table with crayons and a half-finished drawing, looked up and said, "Daddy, Mom said helping people makes the sad parts quieter." Her words pierced him. That night, he signed up, the day of the volunteer work. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of antiseptic and disinfectant, a combination he had hated yet grown intimately familiar with. Lily clutched his hand as they walked into the children's ward. His heartbeat quickened as memories surged, sharp and unwelcome, but seeing her small smile, filled with courage he remembered from her mother, Daniel felt a strange steadiness settle over him. Claire was already there, dressed casually, clipboard in hand, her hair tied back loosely, and when she saw them, her expression softened. She knelt down to greet Lily, her voice warm and careful, and Lily's laughter filled the room like sunlight. Daniel watched as Claire patiently guided them through reading to children, coloring, organizing toys, even holding a scared little boy who refused to speak. Every small gesture reminded Daniel of the quiet strength that kindness could carry, and he found himself feeling, without shame, that maybe the world wasn't entirely cruel. Hours passed, blending into moments of silence and laughter, and then a nurse approached him, hesitant. "There's a family, just admitted. Their daughter lost her mother suddenly. They need someone to talk to." Daniel froze. The words brought him back to that hospital room, back to Emily's bedside, back to Lily's wide-eyed stare. The urge to say no was almost physical. But Lily's hand gripped his, Claire's presence at his side steadied him, and something deeper, something beyond fear, pushed him forward. He nodded. Inside the room, the air was thick with grief. A father sat holding his sobbing child, staring at the empty space where a mother should have been. Daniel knelt beside them, careful with his voice, careful with his words. He didn't offer platitudes, he didn't claim to have answers. He shared what he knew: fear, love, pain, hope. He let the father cry openly. Let the little girl hold his hand as he told her it was okay to feel sad, that it was okay to remember. Somewhere in the room, he saw Claire standing quietly, a silent witness to what it truly meant to heal someone through presence rather than words. By the time they left, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the hospital floors. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a subtle loosening of the chains he'd carried for years. In the car, with Lily asleep in the back seat, Claire didn't speak at first. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was comforting, a recognition that they had shared something profound without needing to name it. Finally, she said, softly, "You don't have to carry everything alone, you know." Daniel's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "I don't know any other way. Maybe you can learn," she replied gently. "And maybe someone else can walk with you. Not instead of her. Not instead of Lily, but with you." He wanted to argue, to tell her that love didn't get redistributed, that it didn't expand without hurting someone else. But the truth was already opening a crack inside him, small but undeniable. For the first time in years, Daniel considered a possibility he hadn't allowed himself to consider, that he could care for someone again, not by forgetting the past, not by betraying Emily's memory, but by honoring it and still letting life move forward. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the darkened city through the window. Memories of Emily's laughter, of her gentle scolding when Lily spilled her juice, of her hand in his during hospital visits, all blended into a bittersweet ache that made him ache and smile at the same time. He realized that grief was not a cage, it was a compass. It pointed him back to the love he had lost, but it also pointed him forward, to the life he still had to live, to the small hands depending on him, to the possibility that kindness and care could weave new threads of hope even in the most broken places. And somewhere in the quiet, Daniel acknowledged, for the first time in a long time, that Claire's kindness wasn't just professional concern, it was an invitation to open a door he had long kept locked, to step out of the shadow of fear, to embrace a future he had refused to see. The days after the hospital visit passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Daniel found himself noticing Claire more often than he intended, the way her brow furrowed slightly when she was thinking. The way she carried herself with quiet confidence, the way she spoke to Lily with a warmth he hadn't expected from a boss. At first he resisted, telling himself it was inappropriate, that his heart was a closed vault, that no one could, or should, replace Emily. Yet, each small gesture chipped away at the armor he had built around his life. It began with phone calls about Lily's school projects, small questions about art fairs and science experiments, but always delivered with a tone that suggested genuine interest rather than obligation. He tried to respond casually, but his voice betrayed him, softening unexpectedly, lingering longer than it should have. Lily noticed too. She would beam at him and say, "I like Claire. She's nice. She laughs like Mom." The comparison was sharp, cutting through him, yet also oddly comforting. If Claire reminded Lily of happiness instead of absence, maybe she was exactly the presence they needed. One rainy afternoon, the real test arrived. Lily's school called. She had a panic attack during a class presentation, overwhelmed by separation anxiety and memories she couldn't yet articulate. Daniel dropped everything and rushed to the school, heart pounding in his chest like a drum warning of danger. He arrived to find Ellie pale and trembling, refusing to leave the classroom. Before he could react further, Claire appeared, keys in hand, offering to cover his meetings and drive him if needed. Daniel wanted to refuse to protect his pride, but exhaustion and necessity won. In the car, as the rain pounded the windshield, he told her things he had never spoken aloud, his guilt, his fear, his overwhelming sense of failure. He spoke of Emily, of the hospital, of nights spent staring at the ceiling while Lily slept, his heart aching for something he couldn't name. Claire listened quietly, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder when he faltered, her presence steady but unintrusive. For the first time in years, Daniel felt that his burdens could be shared, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that kindness could coexist with grief. By the time they reached home, Lily had calmed, curled around her rabbit, exhausted but safe. She looked at Daniel, then at Claire, and asked the question that would have broken him 2 years ago. "Daddy, do you think I can be happy even if Mom isn't here?" Daniel froze, heart tightening. He looked at Claire and then at his daughter, and for the first time, he realized that love was not finite. It didn't vanish when someone left. It expanded, endured and reshaped itself. "You can be happy, sweetheart," he whispered, voice thick. "Mom loved us enough to want that." The words felt like a release, both for him and for Lily. That night, after tucking her into bed, Daniel sat alone in the living room, the apartment unusually silent. Memories of Emily's laughter mingled with the faint echo of Claire's warmth, and he allowed himself a thought that had been unthinkable for years. Perhaps it was okay to move forward, to let someone else into their lives without betraying the past. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel began noticing the subtler threads of life returning. Laughter that wasn't forced. Evenings where Lily asked for extra bedtime stories, quiet moments shared with Claire that felt natural and hurried and comforted him. She didn't rush him, didn't push boundaries. She simply existed alongside them, a constant reminder that kindness could coexist with grief, that love could be renewed without diminishing what had come before. One evening, Daniel watched Claire kneel beside Lily as she explained her latest art project, a drawing of a hospital room filled with sunlight, with people holding hands and smiling. Claire's soft laughter echoed, and Daniel felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. He realized that he could allow himself to hope again, not because he had forgotten Emily, but because the love he had carried for her had taught him how to recognize beauty and goodness in others. The emotional walls he had so carefully constructed were cracking, not all at once. Not completely, but enough to let a glimmer of possibility seep through. And somewhere inside him, Daniel understood that the most profound form of courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to love again, to allow someone else into the delicate spaces of one's heart. It was a slow awakening, almost imperceptible, like dawn breaking gradually over a city skyline. Yet when he caught Claire's eye one evening at work, and saw her smile, the quiet understanding between them was unmistakable. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply recognition. Two people who had faced loss, who had survived, who had learned that kindness could transform despair into connection. And for the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't only about survival. He imagined laughter, shared evenings, quiet dinners, and Lily's small hand in his, steady, unafraid, loved. He realized that grief, while permanent, did not have to define the limits of joy. It could coexist, shadowing the edges, yes, but never extinguishing the possibility of light. It started subtly, in gestures that could have been overlooked, but Daniel noticed every single one. Claire stopped by his desk not just with work updates, but with small treats for Lily, stickers, little notebooks, sometimes even a homemade cookie she insisted Lily try. At first, Daniel resisted, shifting the gifts to the side, worried that this was too much, too soon. But Lily's face lit up every time. And Daniel found himself watching them, feeling something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: relief. Not just for Lily, but for himself, a quiet sense that maybe life could still offer kindness without breaking him. Then came the first moment that truly scared him. Claire invited them to dinner. Not a company dinner. Not a casual weekend obligation, but a simple, thoughtful invitation. "We could take Lily somewhere she likes, I'd love to join." The words should have been easy to decline, but Daniel froze. It was a test he hadn't realized he was ready for, a challenge to see if he could step out of the grief that had cocooned him for years. He thought of Emily's photo on the mantel, of Lily asleep upstairs clutching her rabbit, and for the first time, he didn't feel guilt at the idea of someone else entering their lives. He accepted. The dinner was a quiet revelation. Claire's presence was natural, neither intrusive nor forced. She laughed at Lily's jokes, asked questions without judgment, and somehow, without saying a single word, made Daniel realize how much he had missed human warmth, not just romantic, but connection itself. The evening stretched into hours. The kind of time that feels timeless when you're surrounded by people who see you, truly see you, and don't flinch at the edges of your scars. Daniel felt his chest open in ways he hadn't anticipated, a sensation both terrifying and intoxicating. Over the following weeks their bond grew, carefully, intentionally. Claire never rushed, never demanded, she simply existed in their lives. A steady presence. Daniel found himself sharing pieces of his life he had kept hidden, the quiet mornings after Lily went to school, the sleepless nights thinking about Emily, the tiny victories of parenthood that often went unnoticed. Claire listened without judgment, sometimes offering a quiet observation, sometimes just holding space. And through her, Daniel began to see the possibility that love didn't erase loss, it reframed it, layered it with meaning, made it richer instead of emptier. The moment of true transformation came unexpectedly. One evening at the park, Daniel had promised Lily ice cream if she finished her homework without complaint, and Claire had tagged along. They were walking along the fountain, Lily skipping ahead, when Daniel noticed a mother helping her small child onto a swing. The scene hit him hard. He remembered Emily doing the same, her laughter blending with Lily's when she was tiny. He froze, the familiar tightness in his chest threatening to pull him back into old grief. But then he looked at Claire. She was smiling at him, not with pity, not with expectation, but with quiet understanding. "You're not alone," she said softly, almost as if reading his thoughts. "You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore." The words weren't a balm, they were a revelation. Daniel realized that the fear of losing someone else had kept him imprisoned, had kept him from letting joy back in. From seeing that life could still offer beauty without diminishing the love he had for Emily. That night, walking home with holding both their hands, Daniel felt a shift inside him, subtle but undeniable. He could grieve and still allow happiness. He could honor the past and embrace the future, and for the first time, he understood that kindness, the quiet, persistent kind, was more powerful than any shield grief could construct. It wasn't a sudden transformation. There were nights he still wept quietly, remembering Emily's smile, her gentle scoldings, the way Lily's tiny hand once curled around his during hospital visits. But now, grief no longer consumed him entirely. It had a shape, a place, a time, contained and acknowledged, but it no longer defined every moment. And in that space, Claire existed. Not as a replacement, not as a distraction, but as proof that life could still surprise, could still offer love, could still nurture even the most broken hearts. By the time summer came, Lily had grown closer to Claire than Daniel had dared to hope. She laughed freely around her, asked questions, sought advice. and occasionally glanced at her father with the shy smile of a child who knew her family was expanding, not shrinking. Daniel watched this silently, feeling a mixture of awe and gratitude, realizing that his life, once rigid, solitary, and consumed by fear, had begun to bloom again, watered by patience, kindness, and the courage to step forward despite uncertainty. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Daniel and Claire sat on the park bench while Lily chased pigeons nearby. Claire turned to him and said softly, "You've carried so much, Daniel. But you're allowed to let it go even a little." Daniel nodded, feeling a weight lift, just slightly. He wasn't healed. He would never stop remembering Emily. But he had discovered something equally important: the capacity to love again without guilt. To step into life without fear. To let someone walk beside him without feeling he was betraying the past. And in that quiet moment, with the world stretching before them and Lily's laughter echoing across the green, Daniel understood the truth he had been avoiding all these years. Sometimes, the most profound act of courage is simply to open your heart again, and to let kindness guide the way. The change in Daniel's life didn't announce itself with grand gestures or sudden declarations. It revealed itself quietly, in the spaces between ordinary moments, in laughter that lingered a little longer, in evenings spent together without schedules or agendas, and in the way Lily's small hand fit naturally into Claire's. One Saturday morning, Daniel found himself watching them in the kitchen, Claire helping Lily carefully spread peanut butter on toast. Hair slightly disheveled, eyes soft with patience, and realized he hadn't felt this level of peace in years. The moment struck him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Life could be messy. Grief could linger, but love too, had the power to heal and expand. He remembered the early days after Emily's death, the nights spent staring at a ceiling that offered no answers, the hollow ache of realizing that his world had irrevocably changed. Back then, the idea of loving again had seemed impossible, almost a betrayal. And yet now, watching Claire and Lily, Daniel understood that this new love was not a replacement, but an addition, a testament to resilience, to courage, and to the enduring power of kindness. He had learned to carry Emily's memory without being crushed by it, to honor it without letting overshadow the possibility of happiness. Their life together was not perfect. There were nights when Lily asked questions that made his chest tighten, when memories of Emily invited into their daily routines, when grief whispered that loving again was somehow wrong. But in every instance Claire was there, not as a savior, not as someone attempting to erase the past, but as a partner, patient and unwavering. She listened. She held space. She offered warmth where fear had once ruled, and slowly, Daniel allowed himself to trust again. The culmination came unexpectedly, at a school recital. Lily stood on stage, her small frame illuminated by the spotlights, and as she performed a song she had painstakingly practiced for weeks, Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. The audience clapped, cheers echoing, and Lily's eyes swept the crowd until they landed on him. She beamed, a mixture of pride and joy shining from her face, and Daniel saw Claire beside him, clapping softly, her smile mirroring the warmth in her eyes. That single glance, that moment of recognition, brought home the truth he had spent years running from: love could survive tragedy, could coexist with grief, could nurture instead of consume. After the recital, Lily ran into their arms, breathless and triumphant, and Daniel felt something he had thought impossible for so long: unguarded happiness. Claire knelt to his level, whispering, "See, you're not alone in this." He nodded, and for the first time, he didn't feel guilty for the feeling swelling inside him. This was not a betrayal. It was life continuing, stronger, more vibrant, and filled with unexpected grace. Later that night, as they sat on the couch together, Daniel held Lily close while Claire leaned into him. A quiet affirmation that they had built something together, fragile yet unbreakable. He spoke softly, words he had never dared to voice in years. "Thank you for being here, for being kind, for helping me see that love doesn't end." Claire's hand squeezed his, warm and steady, and in that simple touch, he felt an entire lifetime of pain and hope reconciled. The story of Daniel's grief and awakening spread subtly among those who knew him, though few understood the depth behind the quiet father and capable employee. Some assumed he had simply moved on. Others saw a man transformed. But Daniel knew the truth: he had survived, not because he survived, not because time healed everything, but because kindness, unexpected, unwavering, patient, had illuminated a path back to life. Love had returned, not as a thunderous storm, but as a gentle, persistent light, guiding him and Lily forward, step by step, toward a future full of possibility. The final, unforgettable lesson was clear: grief could not be erased, but it could coexist with joy. Loss did not prevent love from entering again, it shaped it, gave it depth, and taught him to cherish every fragile, fleeting moment. And as Daniel watched Lily asleep that night, Claire's hand in his, he whispered a quiet promise into the darkness. We will love, we will laugh. We will honor what was lost, and we will never stop being kind. In that quiet apartment, filled with the soft hum of life resuming, Daniel finally understood something he had once believed impossible, that the heart, even after breaking, can open again, that love is not finite, and that kindness has the power to rebuild worlds from sorrow. And in that understanding, he felt a peace that had once seemed unimaginable, a quiet, enduring hope that would guide them through every sunrise, every storm, and every moment of ordinary, miraculous life to come.